Hello, and thank you so much for attending this webinar. My name's Natalia. I'm a Logosophical student and a medical doctor in the UK, where I live. I came into contact with Logosophy when I was growing up. So Logosophy has been very important to me throughout my life, providing a strong foundation to make my steps with confidence. And what is Logosophy? Logosophy is a science of self-knowledge and conscious evolution created by Carlos Bernardo González Becoche in Argentina in 1930. Throughout the years, Logosophy has grown and spread mostly in South America, where it's easy to find a Logosophical primary school, and I studied in one of them in Rio de Janeiro. Logosophy has reached other countries, and living in the UK, I'm connected to the European branch located in Barcelona. In this presentation, I'll show you some teachings of the author, and I'll show you a few books. But every time I do that, please rest assured that we're not trying to sell any book here. Logosophy is a non-profit organization, and all the books are available to be downloaded for free on the website logosophy.org.uk or logosophy.info/en for the books in English, but there are also other languages there. What does it mean, self-knowledge and conscious evolution? It means Logosophy provides powerful tools and an original method to understand oneself and evolve, knowing why and how to make those changes. First, identifying the aspects to work on, then forming the image of what I want to become, and finally, providing a method to reach it. Logosophy is way beyond today's topic, but today's topic has been very much important to those steps with confidence in my life that I've mentioned, and as it's about mental defenses as a foundation for a better life. I'm going to talk about how that I've been building with the Logosophical study a better foundation for my life and how this study has impacted me. In my childhood, I came into contact with something that became very special. I read a Logosophical book that is a collection of advices from the author to his son, and I was about 9 years old at that time. I brought a paragraph of the book to show you, and it says, if you like jokes, try to make yours always pleasant so that they cause a good reaction. Make sure that your jokes never hurt the feelings of your listeners. And for me, at the age of 9, this was quite important. And I'll tell you why. At that time, I was beginning to train my observations to learn something for my life. I began to observe jokes and to label them as good ones and bad ones. Quite a very simple label system. I started seeing that there are jokes that everyone would have a laugh. And there were jokes that others, that not everyone was laughing. And sometimes one even ended up crying. For me, the ones that didn't belittle anyone else, I labeled as good jokes. And the bad ones were the ones that often hurt the feelings of others. So usually, after joking about something, I used to ask myself, is everyone laughing? Have I offended anybody? How can I avoid the jokes that belittle others and that leave me feeling bad about myself for having hurt someone else's feelings? How to make all of my jokes and the playtime friendly. At that point, I found that some people usually say those bad jokes to sort of like stand out. And nowadays, some of these jokes are even called bully or the act of bullying someone. But what are the things behind those actions? So years went by, and looking a bit deeper into the jokes that carry within themselves this germ of bad intention. The concept of harm represents this bad intention. For example, at schools, when children make fun of others, pointing out the mistakes or flaws in front of the other kids, sometimes using them as targets, bullying. This is the evil thought that translates the bad intention into a bad action. Thinking about those bad actions, I would ask, if it's me doing that throughout my life, if I keep having this attitude towards people around me, what will be the consequences that I will face as my own inheritance? Meaning me inheriting tomorrow what I do or what my actions are today. Studying Logosophy, I found this teaching. The most serious evils that burden man are ignorance and unconsciousness. From these evils results everything man does to the detriment of his own being, as they continually predispose him towards deviations and misconceptions. What knowledge am I lacking to avoid recurrent mistakes that make me look back at my attitude and regret what I have done? When I lose my patience with a family member or friend, when I don't protect a good intention from people around or the environment, when I want to say something at a Congress meeting but get stopped by the thought of what are the others going to think of me? Or in this case, of when I hear someone saying something bad and ignore it, if I can identify why I don't stop this harm. I'll read one of the teachings of the authors. A fact that has been proven over and over again during the repeated observations that I undertake on the minds is that the person who listens to a bad thought, who listens to an insult directed towards another, does so because he carries in his mind thoughts that have the same affinity. It is because inside of him, within his mind, the insult exists. And how much shame would a person feel believing himself to be fair or kind when he sees himself converted into the sad vehicle of evil, of humiliation, or of a bad intention? How clearly the loss of all purity and of all self-respect is noticed when humiliation takes hold of the individual and transforms him into a low and vile being. So the purity was the good intention, and if I don't stand by it, I'm not respecting myself. Before my contact with this teaching, I used to think that being a vehicle of harm was to help it spread with actions or words expressing ideas that contaminate people's mind and make the environment hostile, aggressive, critical, etc. And throughout many years, I've been taking a position of which I consider to be quite common, that is of not stimulating gossip or criticism whenever I heard it, and even to distance myself from those who used to belittle others. I would call my attitude as avoiding a conflict, but the bystander usually doesn't realize the power they have. And I used to think that the simple fact of not stimulating the strength of these actions was positive, but I still end up feeling bad about myself, and I didn't know why. This new view that the author presents translates into words what I had already felt. Shame. Shame for letting words pass through me easily without an attempt to block them, without any resistance whatsoever. I've discovered the reason why I was feeling so bad. I found out that, well, something was happening. And ironically, what was happening was my omission. Because there was something that there was the cause of the action that I disapproved. And my omission was allowing that to continue and grow. The omission helps this bad force to grow because it provides no obstacles. So despite being a passive attitude, it turned me into a vehicle of harm. Now, how often have I omitted, and which situations could I have avoided? So many. Then after all this, my biggest question was, how would it be possible to take action towards this form of harm without creating conflict? So please bear in mind, so please bear with me while I talk about two very short, distinct experiences. I was shadowing a cardiologist consultant in clinic when one of the patients arrived complaining and diminishing another cardiologist. After about 4 or 5 attempts, he finally managed to change the subject and focus on the care plan. When she left, he turned to me and said, "Be careful when someone tells you bad things about someone else, because in the future, it may be about you that they'll say bad things about." And this was an advice that came through experience. And it was so interesting that it got stuck in my mind because it's a habit and habits come from thoughts. So studying logosophy, I could understand it even more. And I would ask myself, why are there times when I say something I didn't want to say? What makes me act in a way I don't want to? What strength moves me or pushes me to do those things? Logosophy presents the concept of thoughts. It affirms that the thoughts are psychological entities generated in the human mind, where they develop and even acquire a life of their own. So thoughts are autonomous agents that influence the behavior of human beings. In this case, influencing the patient to criticize a professional, like a puppet of this thought that she ignores. The second experience I also had in my workplace, but this one was more recent. A couple of co-workers were saying bad things about a colleague, also a consultant. At that moment, I could identify the thought of harm, and I felt the responsibility to interfere. I felt that I couldn't be silent anymore. And between the three of us there, I was actually the only one that was discussing cases with them. So I had a knowledge that they didn't have. So I began telling them about his background and the logic behind the care plan. And it reached a point when I saw I was actually being able to defend his image without creating a conflict, without being a vehicle of harm. It was such a rewarding moment. As a result to all of this, I found that if the thought of criticism that contaminates the environment is ignored, that is, if I do nothing to oppose to this thought, this does not weaken its action. On the contrary, it ends up gaining more strength with my lack of action as it passes through me without resistance, gaining strength in the mind of who is saying them and finally reaching someone else. So it still escalates. And this is so interesting. The criticism represents not only a thought, but a harmful thought. There's no good outcome from it. And in general, if we ask people if they support gossips at work, they would say no. It's a common experience, it's a common knowledge. So why it keeps happening? And that was when I realized that this harmful thought makes use of something called psychological deficiencies. So in this process of investigation, I would ask myself, why are there thoughts within me that sabotage my own will? Do I have them? What hinders my actions from being in line with my decisions? How can I let my attitude be the opposite of what I had set out to do? Logosophy presents the concept of psychological deficiencies. Logosophy so denominates the negative thought which, insisted in the mind, exerts a strong pressure on the individual's will, continually inducing him to satisfy its insatiable psychic appetite. Now, if I'm not the one making decisions in my life, then who am I allowing to do so? If I don't have the reins of my life, then who has them? Changing the scenario a bit. In my work, there is a lot of reading, and sometimes when I sit down to read, something crosses my mind to deviate my attention. Like a thought of sending a message to someone, or getting water, or eating something, getting some chocolate, or that I'm too tired and I need coffee, or to go on social media. So many thoughts. And I find two interesting aspects whenever that happens. Well, first of all, I like to read, and I had chosen to do that at that time. And secondly, those thoughts were not there before. So where were they? And why so suddenly so many thoughts appear in my mind? If I picture my mind as a bus, it's as if I'm trying to drive the bus, and all those thoughts are coming and going as they please through the open windows, like wind, trying to make me change what I had set out to do with my time. Not even mentioning when they try to convince me to drive the bus themselves. Whenever I listen to those thoughts, I realize that I end up procrastinating, spending way too long on a task, wasting energy and not accomplishing what I had wanted in that time. As a consequence, that would often make me feel so frustrated with myself, draining my energy. Some of those thoughts are so developed that they camouflage as things I actually needed to do. Using the same example, when I sat to study, a thought would cross my mind saying, hey, you need to do the laundry? What about the lunch dishes? Wasn't there something I needed to buy in a supermarket? What was that? And obviously, if I was just watching telly, they would have never crossed my mind. The author lists more than 40 deficiencies in this book. That would be the next slide, please. Yeah, they usually don't act on their own. They like forming a pack. On those examples I talked about, I could identify lack of willpower, inadaptability, disobedience, lack of discipline, so many. And there are many, many others that the author explains in this book. However, there was still a question I had not answered. How can I protect my mind from thoughts that influence me to do things I don't want to? In the topic, mental defenses, of this other book, the author mentions the Logosophical method recommends to recruit an ever-increasing number of thoughts in the mind, drafted as soldier thoughts, whose duty is to defend the mind. As in a military organization, such thoughts will be grouped in various regiments. If all of them exercise the same activity or specialized in the same aspect of the cognition, the other points of the mental fortress would be vulnerable to any attack. Recruiting the soldier thoughts that will defend my mind. By the way, the author talks about them in the book as well. And the example I gave was just about trying to focus, but there are so many other examples I identified that this defense is needed in my life. And this defense is exactly the opposite of the psychological deficiencies, as they are anti-deficiencies. They are efficiencies, qualities, and knowledge that will annihilate the deficit, so one can enjoy the positive result. Logosophy is therefore a science of conscious evolution, commencing by recognizing what happens inside oneself. It is a process of self-knowledge that needs to be conscious. An individual work within oneself, because each one can only know about their own process, but in collaboration with the practical experience of other students, like I did here today, we gather the pieces and form a better understanding. Logosophy brings a new concept of life, so needed nowadays in this chaotic and confused situation that we're living. If you would like to know more, Logosophy is on social media, on Instagram, Facebook. There are the videos on YouTube as well. There is also the website where you can find all the books for free. And in the name of the Logosophical Foundation, thank you very much for listening.